him start a startup business.
Great, thank you, Joe. Tough to follow a talk about Afghanistan, but see what we can do. It's definitely a shifting gears. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Elliptigo that makes a product that you saw up front, the purpose of which is really to enable people who can't run or are losing the ability to run to experience running again, and to help athletes be able to create the spacebar. How do I change this? Athletes train without impact. Really, three elements I want to talk about today about the subject of how you get from ideation to really profitability in a small business environment. I'll give you a little background on Elliptigo, where it came from and where it's going. I think things like preparation and luck and tenacity tend to be left out of discussions about how companies get from start to some sort of successful step. And then I think there's real application for Marine Corps leadership principles within a small company environment. If you can recognize that you're no longer working with Marines, that you're working with people who are definitely not Marines, but they can still be managed and made effective using a lot of the same tools that you use to try to get Marines to be managed and effective. So the history and future of Elliptigo. When we first started off this company, we really wanted to do three things. We wanted to create sport. We wanted to deliver a fantastic return to investors we'd be lucky enough to find, as well as to ourselves. And then we really wanted it to be a positive experience for myself and my co-founder. That's what we shook hands on way back when we started this company in 2005. It's been a long road, and it was funny, I hadn't appreciated this until I had to sit down and make this slide. It's like we really did start this thing in 2005. I'd just gotten through law school and was working for a judge. It was the most miserable experience of my life. And my co-founder was working at an engineering firm down here in San Diego. We were about 500 miles apart. When I had this idea of really enabling myself to run again, because the Marine Corps and contact sports and some endurance sports had been pretty unkind to my lower extremities, and I found myself unable to run about the age of 32, which is too young to face that dilemma of what do you do if you can't run. And I've been a cyclist before, never found the bike to be comfortable, hated the gym, sort of stuck without an ability to exercise in a way that I wanted to. And so really the genesis of the product was to solve my problem. We started off as a general partnership. We've never had a written agreement between myself and my co-founder. And the first two things we did was search for somebody else who had thought of this same exact obvious idea and see if anybody out there in the world would want one besides me. The red labels are prototypes that we built, or actual physical products. And the first thing we did was kick off on a prototype that we named Alpha, file our provisional patent, and then about a year and a half into the whole process, we came across a patent that I didn't find initially, which had us dead to rights. It was a done deal. It was filed by the guy who invented the elliptical trainer, licensed it to Precor, the company that makes all the indoor elliptical equipment, and he had 16 patents to his name, and there was no way to design around this guy's patent. And so at one point we actually quit what we were doing, but then I really wanted to have the next generation bike, and my co-founder really wanted to build the next generation bike. So we kept sort of working. We actually skipped beta and went straight to Charlie as our second built-up device. Filed our own patent with the theory that we were going to go head-to-head with Larry Miller, the guy who had 16 patents and litigated against 11 different companies within the fitness space and pulled out about $100 million in damages through patent enforcement in the 90s. And our plan was we were going to go head-to-head with that guy. But then Miller forgot to pay his royalty fees, true story. And so we knew that, and about a month before his patent would be considered abandoned, we just sucked it up and we cold called him. Googled him, found his phone number on the internet, cold called him, and within 3 weeks we became the exclusive licensees to the patent that we won, which totally changed the direction of our efforts and our likelihood for success at the end of the day. The next year, we did our first proving test. It was a 50-mile ride from Rosarito to Ensenada. Should be fairly familiar with it down here. It's pretty popular here in San Diego. About the fourth guy that got on our second prototype was Greg LeMond, and that was a turning point for the company because he came back from riding for about 45 minutes, said he wanted to build them. And we were like, great, because we both have jobs and we don't want to build these things. So go for it, Greg. And of course that didn't work out the way it was supposed to. So we ended up building another prototype version and setting up Elliptigo as an actual corporation. Finally got our seed funding in 2009. So 4 years after we started this thing, we brought in money from outside investors, started pre-selling the product, hiring people, typical get a business off the ground approach. Completed something called the Death Ride, which is arguably the toughest ride in the country, if not certainly in California. And started continuing to do divisional filings now of our patents. And then developed what we called Fox, which was our final prototype before we actually go to production. And in 2010, we actually launched our first product, closed a Series A from fundraising, hired a bunch of reps, filed a bunch more patents, had our first world championships, which was pretty exciting. Next year, we set up a subsidiary in the UK, came out with 3 new products, the C Series, which is 2 products, and then the 11R. Then we expanded from an independent rep model into a retailer model. So we went through the sell online to sell through specialty retail in about a year, and now we're up to about 300 retailers. This year we created an organization called the Elliptigo Project, which has affiliated with it about 20 of the best runners in the country right now, all of whom train on our product and are trying to make the Olympics here this year for London. Our patent portfolio right now has 14 issued patents, and our real focus is on marketing, raising awareness, and developing new products. So that's my last 7 years of life in one slide. Really doing 3 simple things right now: growing the business, protecting intellectual property, and developing this new sport of elliptical biking, and trying to get more and more people involved and actually bringing the awareness and the competitive level up, which has been pretty exciting. So that's the easy story, that if you were to write a case study, you'd be like, oh, these guys did first prototype, second prototype, then they launched their product, and they went sold online, and then whatever. But when you dig down a little bit deeper, I think the interesting elements that have enabled us to do that really have far less to do with the idea and more to do with kind of preparation, luck, and tenacity. I think that those were the 3 underlying elements of why we've been able to make money off of selling a crazy bike. In terms of preparation, we were fortunate in the sense that myself, my co-founder, and our third partner all had known each other and worked together, but we had a very different set of skills. So I'd come out of Columbia Law School and was working at McKinsey Consulting, so I had a very comfortable viewpoint of legal issues and entities, and I wasn't afraid to talk to lawyers, and I wasn't afraid to not pay lawyers, and I wasn't afraid to deal with the business side, fundraising, and all those things. My co-founder, no interest in any of that. Hardcore engineer. His grandfather's in the Engineering Hall of Fame. He had been an engineer at General Electric before we met here at a company called Palomar. And he had this deep expertise in mechanical engineering I knew nothing about, and had no interest in replicating or questioning or getting involved in. And then our third partner was a Naval Academy graduate and had developed his own sales consultancy. So he'd been doing sales for 12 years before we came to him with the idea of joining the Elliptigo team. So we had this nice 30 years of preparation individually along very different avenues. I think that's really helped us avoid conflict as well as execute efficiently in a small team. Number 2, we understood what we were trying to develop. I'm a former Ironman triathlete. My co-founder is a former Ironman triathlete. He's also a very competitive ultramarathoner. He runs the 100-mile, 20,000 foot a gain, 24-hour races and comes in the top 10, top 15 consistently. And then our partner, Bryce, played lacrosse in college, has run 13 marathons, qualified for Boston. His wife just qualified for Boston. I mean, we really had an authentic understanding of what running was, what running wasn't, and why this product had value and what it needed to do in order to be interesting. And I think that was an important underlying element that we all shared and predated the company. And then the third thing we did was we didn't race to market. I mean, you know, when we were going out originally to ask for money, people said you should take Delta, which was our third prototype, to market, which was the worst advice we possibly could have had, because we'd have gone out of business if we launched with Delta. It just had too many fundamental flaws, and it wasn't that good of a product. But there was this mentality in the investment community of rush to market, rush to market, rush to market, rush to market, and then fix it once it's on the market. And I mean, that's not the way I was trained in the Marine Corps. I mean, it's always a crawl, walk, run approach. It's like, let's get there slowly, but when we get there, let's be right. And so we all shared that same mentality, and I think that really helped us not stumble out of the gate. And if you stumble out of the gate, it can be crushing. So I think those were three nice elements of preparation that really have helped us position well to at least have a run at trying to do something successful. The second thing that rarely gets talked about when anyone comes up and talks about how great their company is luck. And I think it's hard to say whether preparation, luck, or tenacity are the most important thing, but I don't think you can discount luck. If I was 10 years younger or 10 years older, this thing wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be working at Elliptigo. So it had to come at the right time for me personally to be able to really do anything with it. It had to be the right time for my two partners, or I would have had to find two other people that were at that right time. And frankly, I don't think I worked with two other people that would have been at the right time for us to really have a nice coalescing team of complementary skill sets. For me, it had to be the right injury. If I could still run today, I wouldn't be talking here. So the injury itself was unlucky, and it was lucky. And, you know, I was born in California. I was born here in San Diego. And I grew up in San Diego, and I was back in San Diego. And the Marine Corps is based out of San Diego on the West Coast. And I think if I was in the Air Force and located in Omaha, Nebraska, that I wouldn't have found two other guys that had the skill sets that I was looking for to really make this thing happen. And I wouldn't have been surrounded by an investment community that had a bunch of guys that had seen success consistently in investing in small companies. So there's something about I was lucky enough to be born here, and my life has sort of been centered here, that was fortunate, I think contributed to why this thing was able to get off the ground. The second one that was lucky was I happened to work with two pretty well-situated guys that could come and add a lot of value out of the gate, that already had trust, that had been built up 5-6 years before this idea had even come to my head. So we were lucky in the sense that Brent, Bryce, and I all crossed paths at a time where we were all doing triathlon, and we were all at a company that was pretty exciting, entrepreneurial, and growing, and we formed friendships there that we had no idea. No one would have ever said that Bryce, Bryan, and Brent are all going to get together and start a company. I mean, it's just was not in the cards back then, but it ended up being the case. The Miller patent, I mean, it was a huge crushing issue for us that this patent existed, and it was like we almost gave up the company, but it was hugely lucky, because then when we got the license, we actually had an asset that we could turn around to an investor and say, hey, you may not believe in us, but you believe in the idea, and you're going to believe in this Miller guy, because he's cleaned out $100 million out of Life Fitness, True Fitness, Nautilus, all these companies you've heard of. And that was a pretty compelling pitch out of the gate, and I think it's why we were able to land money before we had really a product or sales or any sort of traction. And we were lucky enough that all of the other people that thought of this thing never really had the guts to try it and make it successful. Because like, this isn't a particularly innovative idea, and there's dozens of people out there who have thought of something similar. But in 2005, no one had a product on the market. And in 2010, no one really had a competitive product on the market. There were a few things that are similar, but nothing that was truly trying to emulate running. And that was lucky. I mean, if somebody else, if Miller had gotten crazy and wanted to start this company himself, you know, we would have never started this thing. So there was a lot of luck involved. And But it can't all be luck, and obviously there's a lot of tenacity there. Initial prototyping was hard. Brent worked. We both had full-time jobs, and Brent literally was at work 4 in the morning, cutting metal with bits that didn't work, because I was too cheap to pay for bits that didn't work. They would fly off the machine, like almost take his head off. I mean, and at no point did he give up for lack of tools and time and support on my part in terms of actually getting the physical product developed. Getting Miller's patent took tenacity. We continue to work and try to work around it, and try to work around it, and try to work around it. The fundraising process, for any of you who are going to start companies, get ready for some tenacity. It's a process. I don't care if you're just going to a VC and trying to pull $100 million from a VC, or you're trying to pull 25 grand from some multi-millionaire. It is a process, and it's hard to close every single nickel. And we chose to raise a small amount of money from a ton of people, and that made that process really, really long, nerve-wracking, and unpredictable. And without guts and a little bit of like belief that everything's going to work out for you, it really could have, several points in the process, we could have been out of money. And then obviously the willingness to iterate the design and test it. So those are the key takeaways when I sit down and think about, what have I really learned here from this process. But then thinking about the Marine Corps tie-in, it was interesting to go back and read the leadership principles, which I had not done since probably 1995 when I was in midshipman. But they're very spot on with applicability, I think, in probably any corporate environment, but particularly in a startup. And I'm not going to read them to you. They're obviously available, but don't lose these for you Marines that are coming out and going to corporations. Like, this is right. And the main difference is you're dealing with people who've never seen this, and you're dealing with people who are not Marines. They're not, no one in my company when they were in 2nd grade was like, one day I want to grow up and work at elliptigo. And half the guys in my platoon probably had Marine t-shirts on when they were 7. So it's a different mentality. This isn't their, like, work is not their passion, like the Marine Corps is your passion. But, and, it's not a structured, you don't have power like you have in the Marine Corps in the sense that you don't outrank anyone, even if you're in charge of the whole company. So you have to use different techniques to inspire people to actually accomplish what they can accomplish and deliver the results that you demand from them. But it's very doable, and it can be a much more personal experience, I think, even than in the Marine Corps, which is obviously a very personal experience. So I would definitely recommend, regardless of where you're going, if you're going to business school or you're actually going out into the workforce, wherever you're going, go back and look at the leadership principles. And I didn't go back as deeply into leadership traits. I could probably rattle them off. But I think those are probably less applicable, some of them, but the principles really rung true for me. I think it's a good foundation that the Marine Corps delivers that you can really apply at your corporation. Thank you.